For this room, I say this a little tongue-in-cheek, but I've presented to bankers in the United States a lot, and for whatever reason, they believe that if you digitize something, that's innovation. And my whole point here is that just taking a simple process, simple banking process, and digitizing it is not innovating. What we look for when we invest is we look for rethinking the process. Why do there have to be 20, 30-page forms that companies and people fill out? Why do we rely on credit scores that can often be 6, 12, 24, even 36 months out of date? Hacked. You could have misinformation. I am personally, when I returned to Canada 2 years ago, my identity was stolen. I can tell you that's a horrific experience here in Canada. Could not turn my credit off. Equifax and TransUnion, they were great to deal with. Innovation also is not about action. Just because you do a lot of activity doesn't mean that you're innovating. And innovation doesn't mean you get great results. I don't know if this room can remember, but there was a firm, a social networking firm, that was larger than Facebook. It was called MySpace. I don't know how many of you have a MySpace account, but if you do, I suspect you haven't used it in a while. This is innovation. So one of my favorite companies to analyze, deal with, and work with is actually Alibaba and the group of companies, Alipay specifically, and Tencent, WeChat Pay. What they've really done is they've said the consumer journey digitally has to include absolute frictionless, paperless, cardless transactions. And what they've assembled is through existing technology such as barcodes, NFC, etc., existing technologies such as couponing, existing technologies such as analytics, an unbelievable array of products. Today, using WeChat Pay, you can actually get loans, you can actually pay, transfer, do bill payments, set bill payments. You literally can run your entire financial life in a message app. That, to me, is pretty wild. I'll also say that one of portfolio companies is actually really trying to go even above and beyond that. The idea of actually starting a mortgage inside Facebook, from beginning to end, funding inside Facebook. 7 minutes from the moment you start the application to when you're funded in your bank account. 7 minutes. So a little bit of an overview of fintech in Canada. There are roughly 700 fintechs in Canada right now. You compare and contrast that to the United States, there's roughly 5,000. So we're doing a little bit better than our population relativity versus the United States. Of those fintechs, 60% can be found in Ontario, 80% in the GTA. Toronto is really leading the way in fintech. In terms of investments in the region, we've seen a great explosion of investments. This year is on track to exceed almost $250 million. Last year we did roughly 160 million. In terms of the number of fintechs, what's really cool is that more than half of the fintechs were actually created in the last 5 years, and we actually expect company creation to explode. So of the 700, we actually expect in the next 12 to 18 months another 300 fintechs to be born. Where are they? Are they all just presentations? Are they all just decks? Are they all just hype, fluff, cupcakes, ice cream cones, things like that? And the answer is no. We're actually starting to see it be a little bit later. So seed is still the largest, but seed here is companies that actually have a product. They have a minimum viable product or prototype. What's really exciting for us is the Series A, Series C, which is roughly 1/3 to 40% of all fintechs. So well north of 300 fintechs today actually generate more than $1 million of revenue. In terms of the subsectors of breakdowns, payments and the affiliated part of payments is the largest single segment. The company I actually founded is a company called SoundPays that uses ultrasonic sound waves to transmit payment information so that everything that is a speaker can actually be a point of sale or a transmission point. Anything with a microphone can actually be a wallet or a store of value. So payments innovation in Canada is actually pretty cool. Canada versus the world. Being Canadian, we're always obsessed about where we fit. Well, we're actually doing really, really well. In terms of number of deals and in terms of the growth rates, we're actually a little bit better than Israel, which I think would shock a lot of people. continental China. In terms of growth rates, we're eclipsing Silicon Valley, New York, et cetera. We are one of the fastest growing fintech regions in the world. In terms of market activity, private placements, and M&A transactions, we're actually disproportionate share right now. This is awesome, but we still got a long way to go. So what I thought I would do, given the audience, is talk a little bit about digital lending. So we've done deep dives into digital lenders over the last 20 years. We've also looked at traditional banks around the world, ROA, all those wonderful things. I thought this room would really like that. So what's at stake? Roughly $1 trillion of profits are at stake. If you add in all financial services, it's more than double, so call it $2 trillion, and well north of $10 trillion in market cap. This is an enormous, enormous market. That's why folks like me love it, because we think we can make a lot of money. Definition of digital lending: marketplaces, peer-to-peer, online lender. The kind of common characteristics here is a lot of these models require a middleman kind of activity, where they match people who need capital and people who provide capital. They also rely tremendously on data. Data, in our view, and corroborated by some of the best thinking tanks in the world, is now more valuable than oil. If you were to measure data simply by hundreds of gigabits and the price of a barrel of oil. The other really cool thing is a lot of these new lenders have no branches. So it's been a journey. In 2005, 2008, peer-to-peer lending saw a boom. Then we had something called the financial crisis, not so much fun. Everybody rebuilt, came out, we now have marketplaces. Globally, there are roughly 2,000 digital lenders. Today's banking system. So being a programmer, and I don't always advertise this, but I'm actually a programmer, this is a heat map of a mortgage banking system. So the number of processes that one transaction has to touch and go through inside a core banking system. Give you an idea, this is roughly a month of transaction paper, data, emails, structured data moving around. And on average, small business in Canada and the United States spends over 30 hours. That is absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I can tell you some great stories on how my daughter, who's actually a programmer, she's 16, how she views opening up a bank account in Canada, how she views opening up a bank account in the United States, and her simple question to me: Dad, why? Why is it like this? Why can I pick up Pokemon Go, never read a single instruction, never have someone explain to me how to use it, and it just works and I know what I'm doing? And I can interact with over 100 million people in the world. And yet opening a bank account in Canada took 4 hours. In the United States, it took 2.5. And she said this wonderful phrase to me. She said, "It's my money, I'm giving it to somebody, and they're making it really difficult for me to use. Dad, doesn't make sense to me. Why?" And I said to her, you know what, honey, you're right. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, obviously prone to disruption. My daughter's a great example. Let's talk a little bit about what we do in terms of interest rates and how this can impact the industry. The average digital lender globally charges roughly 12.6%. Average credit card globally 18%. And the average credit card penalty rate is close to 30%. Also in the background, savings to loan differentials hit 10% in 2010s, now 7% below credit cards. Consumer loans on balance sheets have declined for over 50 years. Return on assets has declined for banks, but it's still attractive for fintechs. In fact, the single largest, if you were to read all the analyst reports on Wall Street, single largest preoccupation of the C-suite of banks around the world is return on equity, and the predicted collapse of return on equity from roughly teens down to low single digits. Were that to happen, I suspect a few bonuses would be missed. So, technology creates wonderful gaps. This is why we love it. Charge-offs. If you were to compare charge-offs, delinquency rates, and growth, charge-offs average globally for digital lenders of 3.4%. That includes across all credit classes, roughly 2% for traditional banks. Delinquency rates 1.4% versus 0.8%. And loan growth. Digital lenders are growing their loan books at roughly 95% versus the banks at 12%. Average operating cost of a savings, 6% versus loans, 99% quicker response time, and technology allows ubiquitous reach. Everybody has a smartphone. So what changed? How did we go from FinTech 1.0, which was digitizing processes, to where we are today? Well, really, the financial crisis. The United States average consumer lost all faith in their banks, completely lost faith. Seeing Congress on the steps of the Capitol, sitting there basically praying and having everybody agree that nearly $1 trillion lifeline was required, really shook everybody. Even to this day, when I walk around and I talk to folks, anybody greater than 20 years of age remembers that quite clearly. And so trust was completely taken away. But at the same time, smartphone usage, single thing that people tend to do right when they wake up, first thing they tend to do, on average human being in North America and around the world, is grab their smartphone. First thing they do when they wake up. First thing. It's crazy. It's actually almost attached to us. If I were to survey people under the age of 30, more than half of the people in the world be willing to implant a device like a smartphone in themselves. More than half. That's crazy, right? It's not so crazy, actually. People want to be connected, they want it now, and they want it absolutely instantaneously all the time. But the big thing that changed was technology. Most people don't realize this, but Amazon is the largest supercomputer in the world. It effectively is like electricity. You can tap unlimited, infinite, and virtually free computing power anywhere in the world as long as you have a broadband internet connection. I've actually had the privilege of visiting these data centers. I can tell you that today there's a drawer, looks like a refrigerator drawer. You open it up, and inside there's 10 boards. On each of those 10 boards, there's 160 cores. That's 1,600 cores, and it's 10 high. And that was one refrigerator-sized cabinet in a typical Amazon data center. How many of those cabinets do you think there are?
Thousands. Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds
Hundreds
of thousands?
of thousands. It's a lot. Hundreds of thousands around the world. There are roughly 28,000 IT companies running on Amazon around the world today. 28,000. That's why IBM's getting its butt kicked. But anyway. Small business lending in Canada. 1.2 million small business in Canada, over 25 billion in loans per year. The cost is 3 to 10x prime. Roughly 10% rejection rate. Challenges. Bank ROA today, return on assets, is 1%. Personal loan return on assets is 2.5%. And the net digital lender investor return requires 3.3%. Net digital lending ROA is 4%. This all sounds really wonderful, and you'll say, well, why aren't there more digital lenders? Well, the reason is, number one reason is the cost of acquisition. Acquiring a customer, either personal or small business, around the world averages roughly $1,000. $1,000. So on an average loan of, call it $10,000, it's virtually impossible to make money unless you can do a second, third, fourth loan or provide other products and services. That's our single biggest metric when we evaluate companies, is the cost of acquisition. How quickly can they pay that back? Our typical hurdle rate is it has to be under 3 months. So when we invest in companies, we're looking for them to return their cost of acquisition in less than 3 months. Our vision is that banking becomes a service, lending becomes a service, and payments become a service, fully integrated in existing applications and processes you use today. There is no chance, not in 100 million years, that my daughter ever wants to visit a bank branch again. There is no chance, not in 100 million years, she ever wants to go on a bank's helpline. She doesn't want to use their chat. She doesn't want anything to do with them at all, to be really honest. What she wants to do is, as she's messaging her friends or surfing around online and she's looking, oh, I just got my first job, I have $500 or $600, she wants to be offered products inside that application that she's using today. So if she has $500 and she wants to save, she wants to be offered that savings product inside that app that she's working on. Not fill out a form, not visit a branch, not talk to a call center, and certainly not talk to a chatbot that every bank thinks is the solution to millennials. It's not. A chatbot's not going to cut it.